Under the cloak of twilight, the time-worn gates of Blackthorn Asylum creaked open, as if welcoming the group to its forsaken halls. Marco took the lead, his camera light piercing the dusk. His followers, a small group of urban explorers, trailed behind, each drawn to the asylum for different reasons. Marco, with his magnetic charm, had rallied them here with tales of the asylum's harrowing past and the promise of capturing footage that would solidify their names in internet legend. His eyes gleamed with the thrill of the hunt as he narrated into his camera.
Tonight, my friends, we delve into the heart of madness at Blackthorn Asylum, where the echoes of the deranged whisper from the shadows. Will we meet the specters of the past? Stay tuned to find out.
Ava momentarily suspended her journalistic skepticism. She couldn't help but feel the change in the air. Educated and methodical, she was here to peel back the layers of the asylum's history, seeking truths buried under the rubble and ghost stories. Her recorder was at the ready, capturing every detail from the graffiti-laden walls to the ominous silence that seemed to speak volumes. Beside her, Jonah, the group's self-proclaimed skeptic, snorted at Marco's dramatics.
Ghosts, huh?
He muttered, adjusting the straps of his heavy backpack filled with technical gadgets meant to disprove the phantoms and fables.
There's nothing here but the residue of human error and forgotten lives.
Emily lingered at the back, her youthful eyes wide with a mix of fear and fascination. As an art student and the newest member of the group, she saw the world through the lens of her camera, seeking beauty in places others would find unsettling. The asylum was a canvas to her, each shadow and dilapidated corridor a stroke of genius, but even she couldn't ignore the chill that crept up her spine as she stepped over the threshold. The first room they entered was vast, the remnants of its former purpose left to speculation. Marco's light swept over the old medical equipment, rusted and sinister in its obsolescence. Bed frames lay askew, mattresses long since rotted away. Ava's gaze fell upon an old wheelchair, its wheels slowly turning, as if moved by an invisible occupant.
Did you see that?
She whispered, pointing.
Drafts. Old buildings breathe. It's nothing more than the wind finding its voice.
Jonah was quick to dismiss, but the wind didn't account for the sudden drop in temperature that made for their breath visible, nor the faint sound of a giggle that danced through the air, a remnant of madness, or perhaps a child long forgotten. Emily raised her camera, the click of a shutter slicing through the quiet. The flash illuminated the fleeting shadow that had not been there just a moment before. A shadow with no source, vanishing as quickly as it appeared.
Got something?
Marco asked, moving closer. She reviewed the photo, her heart pounding.
There. I think there was someone or something standing by the window.
They huddled around the camera's small display. Ava's voice was a hushed tone of intrigue.
This place is giving us its secrets already.
Jonah rolled his eyes, though he couldn't deny the unease that settled in his gut.
It's just pareidolia, our brains trying to find patterns in random data.
They decided to split up to cover more ground, a decision that felt right to Marco's sense of adventure, but sent a ripple of anxiety through the rest. Emily and Ava paired up, heading towards the patient rooms, while Marco and Jonah took the direction of the administrative offices. The patient rooms were a gallery of despair. Each door they opened revealed a new scene of decay. Emily's camera flashed repeatedly, capturing the eerie stillness of the rooms. Ava took notes, reading the faded inscriptions on the walls, the pleads and proclamations of those who once resided within. Suddenly, a door slammed shut behind them, and the faint echo of a lullaby filled the air. Emily's hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob, finding it unyielding.
It's stuck,
She said, panic edging in her voice. Ava pressed her ear to the door, listening.
There's no draft here, Emily. And that sound?
Her voice trailed off as they both realised the melody was growing louder, a siren song luring them deeper into the mystery. Meanwhile, Marco and Jonah explored the admin wing. Papers littered the floor, patient records that fluttered like ghosts themselves. Marco was narrating again, the red light on his camera blinking steadily.
Imagine the stories these walls could tell.
He said, panning the light across the rows of filing cabinets. Jonah was examining an old electroshock machine, his expression a mix of horror and disbelief.
Barbaric.
He commented, tracing the straps with his finger.
The real horror is what people did to each other in the name of science.
A sudden crash echoed from the end of the hall, followed by a discord of whispers. Jonah's head snapped up, his previous confidence faltering.
That was not the wind.
He admitted, and even Marco's unusual bravado seemed to wane. They followed the noise to a room with a solitary window, the moon casting an ethereal glow on the dust motes that danced in the air. The whispering seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, unintelligible, yet insistent. Marco raised his camera.
Is there someone here with us?
He asked, the jovial tone gone from his voice. There was no reply, only the sense of something watching, waiting, in the darkness. Jonah, the ever-skeptic, felt the hairs on his neck stand on end, an instinctual reaction to a threat unseen. Back with Ava and Emily, the lullaby had ceased, leaving a silence so profound it was oppressive. The door suddenly gave way, as if whatever held it had decided to let them go. They emerged into the hallway, their eyes meeting a silent agreement. Fear was a tangible thing here, and they were no longer observers to participants in a story that was unravelling with each passing moment. As they made their way back to the main hall, hoping to regroup with Marco and Jonah, the air grew colder, and the building itself seemed to pulse with life. Or was it death? The line between the two blurred in the shadows of Blackthorn Asylum. The inciting incident had passed, the asylum had marked them as its own, and the night was far from over. The grand foyer, once a symbol of the asylum's imposing presence, now felt like a cage closing in on them. Ava's hands shook as she recalled the lullaby's haunting melody and the unyielding door that had trapped them. Emily's eyes were distant, their artistic soul wrestling with the nightmarish reality they faced. Jonah's skepticism had been replaced by a fear that clawed at his rational mind, while Marco's usual confidence was shattered, replaced by the dread that clung to the very air they breathed.
We have to stick together. Whatever walks these halls, we face it as one.
Marco said, as if afraid to stir the spirits. Their descent into the basement was like entering the belly of the slumbering beast. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of mildew and tang of rust. Marco's flashlight, a feeble defense against the encroaching darkness, barely cut through the gloom. Jonah's gadgets, designed to debunk ghostly myths, now screaming with warnings, their electronic cries a symphony of the damned. The basement's heart was an old operating theatre, its tiers of seats surrounding an ominous table that bore silent witness to unspeakable acts. Ava's breath caught her in her throat, her journalistic instincts both horrified and captivated by the table before them. It was then that the shadows coalesced into a more definitive shape. A spectre on the operating table, its visage twisted in agony. The sight rooted them to the spot, their minds struggling to accept what their eyes behold. Marco's camera captured the apparition that seemed to reach out to them in the silent accusation before dissolving into the ether. Jonah's voice trembled as he spoke.
This can't be real.
But the cold that seeped into their bones was a cruel affirmation of the theatre's grim performance. Emily, her voice a fragile thread against the weight of dread.
He was suffering, as if he wanted us to know his pain.
The whispers rose once more, now an argument of voices that swirled around them, an unintelligible chorus that seemed to push and pull at their very souls. Ava, her resolve like iron, stepped toward the centre of the theatre.
We have to understand. This isn't just a haunting. It's a story that demands to be told.
Together, they ventured deeper, coming upon the asylum's archives, a repository of anguish and lost memories. The whispers guided Ava's hand to a particular file, the story of Dr. Crane, whose pursuit of a cure for insanity had led him down the path of darkness, from which he never returned.
Dr. Crane's office.
Marco said, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place.
That's where we'll find our answers.
The office lay at the end of a long corridor, its door slightly ajar, beckoning them into the lair of the asylum's twisted heart. Inside, the remnants of Dr. Crane's existence were preserved in a shroud of dust and silence. His journal, open on the desk, was a window into the mind of a man consumed by obsession. Jonah, his skepticism eroded by the palpable presence of the otherworldly, read the scrawled entries.
He believed he was on the cusp of a breakthrough, a cure for the madness that plagued these walls, but the price was paid in human suffering.
And now his spirit is trapped, tethered to this place by the horrors he inflicted.
Emily concluded, her voice a whisper of realization. The entity was more than a mere apparition. It was a force, a once human soul twisted by its unholy desires. And it was growing stronger, fed by their fears, their presence a beacon to the darkness. Emily was thrust against the window. The group's heart collectively skipped a beat, the experience leaving her trembling against the window pane. Marco and Jonah, their own hearts pounding with fear, pulled her to safety. Ava, notebook in hand, was the first to regain her composure.
We need to keep moving.
Ava insisted, her voice steady, but her hand betraying a slight tremble as she made a note.
Every minute we stay still, it's like we become part of the scenery, and it doesn't seem to like that.
They moved deeper into the asylum, each step taking them further from the rational world outside. The asylum's corridors became a maze of half-seen images and half-heard sounds. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, throwing stark shadows against the peeling walls. As they entered the dilapidated common room, the air grew inexplicably colder. Frost formed on the inside of the broken windows, spreading like creeping ivy across the glass. Jonah's breath appeared in front of him, in a cloud, as he checked his instruments, which were now behaving erratically.
Look at this. The temperature just dropped 15 degrees, and the EMF reader is off the charts.
Ava approached a wall where the children's drawings still clung. The colours faded, but the images disturbingly vivid.
These were their voices.
She said softly.
What if they're still trying to speak?
Suddenly, a child's ball, rotted by age, rolled slowly from a dark corner, stopping at Emily's feet. She recoiled instinctively, her hand snapping up to her camera before she remembered it had been left behind in the struggle at the window. Marco moved to pick up the ball, examining it closely.
Could be rats.
He gestured, but his voice lacked conviction. They continued through the asylum, the weight of unspoken fears growing with every step. The doors to the offices were ajar, swinging gently, as if recently disturbed. Inside, the remnants of paperwork and personal effects lay scattered, as if the occupants had left in a haste. Jonah paused, lifting his head.
Do you hear that?
He asked. The others fell silent, and then they all heard it. A faint scratching, like a pen on paper, coming from the head doctor's office at the end of the hall. Creeping forward, they peered inside the room to see an old fountain pen moving across the dusty ledger. The hand that should be holding it absent. Ava reached out, then hesitated.
Should we?
Before she could finish, the pen dropped to the floor, the scratching sound ceasing abruptly. The silence that followed was oppressive. The group decided to head towards the lower levels, where the patient cells lay. As they descended, the air grew thick. Marco's flashlight began to flicker. He tapped it impatiently, and in that brief moment of darkness, they heard a door slam shut above them. Jonah's voice was tight.
Let's not jump to conclusions. Sound travels oddly in old buildings.
They finally reached the cells, the narrow hallway lined with small, barred rooms. The darkness seemed almost solid here, and they moved slowly, their lights sweeping back and forth. A sudden movement caught their attention, a shadow passing across the wall. Too quick to be detected, Emily, her nerves on edge, whispered.
There's someone here with us.
Marco's voice was tense.
We should double back now.
They turned to leave, but as they did, the sound of footsteps echoed in the corridor. Ava swung her light around, but there was nothing to be seen. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until they were right upon them. Yet still, there was no one there. Ava's voice cracked.
Run!
They sprinted back towards the stairs, the footsteps giving chase. As they reached the safety of the upper floors, the sound faded into the distance. Panting, hearts racing, they collapsed against the walls.
What was that?
Emily gasped, terror and exhilaration mixed in her voice. Jonah shook his head, unable to form a rational explanation.
I don't know, but this place is playing tricks on us.
Marco checked his camera, which had been recording the whole time.
We have evidence now. Whatever's happening, we're onto something big.
Ava, her reporter's instinct kicking in, was already planning their next steps.
We need to regroup, analyze what we have, and come back prepared.
The group made their way out to the exit, the morning light spilling over the foyer. The asylum seemed to retreat, the shadows pulling back as if allowing them to leave. At least, for now.